Oh, shucks. Let me mute that. Okay.
Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to MX Talks. And thank you to all speakers and listeners for joining us today. I'm Dion and Shin.
Hey, and I'm Shin. Yeah,
Yeah, and we will be
I'm
your
gonna
co
be the
host.
host today. Yeah. So we have we're very happy to have invited the speakers today, Nuri, Keith, and Sujin. I think we have a very wonderful line of speakers today.
So, as you all probably know by now, today we will be talking about this popular term ESG and how the blockchain integrates with it. It's quite a unique topic, so I'm personally interested and quite excited to find out more. How about you, Shin?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very interested in ESG. I know it's a huge topic in industry, and especially for blockchain. I think it's something that everyone is talking about as well. But that said, I think although there's a lot of hype around ESG, but also there's very little information about what we can do in terms of ESG. So I think today's talk is very interesting, at least on a personal level for me. But before we introduce our three speakers, Dion, I'd just like to, would you like to take a moment to introduce MarginX?
Okay, thank you. I'll just introduce MarginX really briefly. So MarginX is what we would like to call your bridge to the world of DeFi. We make DeFi easy to learn, understand, and use. So whether you're looking to do some advanced perpetuals trading or you're just a beginner and want to grow some passive income within the crypto space, we have got the solution for you. For more information, you can visit us at our website, marginx.io.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that introduction, Dion. So let's get started. I'd just like to have a quick round of speaker introductions. I'll let each of the speakers introduce themselves. So very briefly, could you just tell us what you do, and in one or two sentences, keep it really brief. Just one or two sentences. Share with us your hobby and yeah. And let's start with Keith. Keith, you there? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Keith. So I'm working in the blockchain industry. I've been in the Litecoin Foundation for the past 5 years and currently working on a DeFi project called the Bacalaba Space, which is on Avalanche. So for this ESG topic, I'm not the ESG expert, but in my previous industry, I do audit the ESG reports and all those. So I got a bit of exposure to ESG reporting for listed companies. But for the blockchain aspect, as one of our design and development, we do explore carbon credits on blockchain, and then we talk to a number of carbon credits companies, and we are trying to put it on the blockchain. So I got some exposure to exploring how to put ESG related stuff into the blockchain. Yeah, that's for personal hobbies. All these most of my hobbies I don't continue them anymore because we're busy with family matters. Yeah.
Oh, so family is
parenting.
taking up most of your time.
Yeah, that's right.
Parenting is my hobby right now.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Moving on, we have Nuri, a data scientist formerly at Visa. Nuri, can you give us a brief intro of yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I mean, I would say I'm probably the only non-blockchain person in the room, but I got very interested in blockchain after meeting Suijin and Shin as well. So I guess this is like the start of my journey in this tech. And when I was at Visa, as you mentioned, I was a data scientist, and I got very into the ESG topic from a measurement point of view. So we built some tools that would allow us to estimate the carbon footprint of purchases. And that got me very interested in the topic overall. So since then, I've just been trying to educate myself more on, the investment side and other current topics around ESG. As you know, like climate is a big issue. The United Nations is, raising the level of urgency on things that we need to do to decarbonize. So yes, I look forward to contributing. And in terms of hobbies, yeah, I'm also a parent, so I'm busy with that. And I would say that I play Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars on the piano every day. So yeah, that's what I do for fun.
That's so funny. Thank you, Nuri.
Thanks, Nuri. Last but not least, Sujin, do you want to share a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Sujin. I am the Executive Director at Blockchain Association Singapore. As I was sharing with a couple of the speakers just now in our pre-session, Blockchain Association Singapore is the only blockchain association that is funded by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So we are as legit as it gets. With regards to sustainability, I have a background in the green economy as well as sustainability. So when there was an invitation to join the Blockchain Association, one of the things that I was really passionate about was to use blockchain for sustainability. And my board thought that was also a very good idea because, a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions around blockchain. Blockchain is fortunately or unfortunately associated mostly with crypto. However, people do not really understand, the basis of blockchain and also how philosophically blockchain and sustainability go hand in hand. So I'll be very glad to elucidate more on that once our talk begins in earnest.
Great.
Oh yes, and hobbies, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. I am a bit of a health freak. I think Nuri knows as well. So I frequently experiment with how I can get the maximum nutrition out of the minimum number of calories. So yeah, that's what I do. I know I'm a geek. I'm a freak too. Yes.
Right. Sounds you're experimenting on yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that's good. Yeah, I once wanted to be a nutritionist when I was but thanks, Sujin, thanks for that introduction. And I think you got us started on a really great note. I mean, you mentioned that there's a lot of misconceptions on ESG and particularly on ESG on blockchain. I think that's exactly why we're going to have this so you know what, without further ado, let's get our conversation moving forward. I just want to start with the basics, right? By defining the term what on earth is ESG, because I think a lot of people are talking about ESG. They know it has something to do with the environment, but exactly what is it about? I think sometimes even we ourselves, we are not entirely clear with that. So I just want to start this off with Nuri. Do you want to help us out with what you think is ESG?
Sure. Well, I mean, I like to explain with an example. So maybe I'll give like a very simple example of my understanding of it. And I think Sujin and Keith can elaborate. So Shin, I'm going to pick on you. Imagine that, you're from Malaysia and you want to invest in these two companies that manufacture iPhones, okay? Because they're both publicly listed and they're both growing, right? So let's call them Company A and Company B. So you start looking at the balance sheet and Company A has a 50% year-on-year growth, whereas Company B is only 20%. So you're thinking, oh my God, Company A's balance sheet looks much better. I'm going to invest in them. But then you start to look a bit deeper into some of the costings, right? And you see that Company A is actually, cutting down on, for example, average salaries. So employees are not receiving not even the minimum wage. Secondly, they use harmful chemicals, and maybe in manufacturing some of these parts, they're not really protecting their employees. And then some of those chemicals are actually leaching onto rivers, and then the company is not really investing on any sort of way to filter down those chemicals. So that's why they're growing. Sorry, am I still there? Yeah, I got stuck. So that kind of explains why they're growing so fast, is because they're cutting down on costs. Whereas Company B, on the other hand, I guess, is doing their due diligence. They're paying, people the minimal pay. They have some filtering equipment to prevent those chemicals from leaching, right? So the way that I think about ESG is like, it stands for environmental social governance, but it's kind of more of a short-term versus long-term gain, right? So if you look at company A in the short run, I mean, you might be getting a good run for your money, but actually that company is a very risky company to invest in because, you know, if the pollutant levels in the river get past a certain extent, then they could be shut down, or all their employees will leave and go to another company. They might get sick, right? So, I mean, I know this is like a very simple way of explaining it, and there's a lot more to it. But the idea of ESG is to look beyond the balance sheet and to think of what kind of integrated value can you bring to the world, right? So I would say that, I mean, profits do matter, but the way that you get there also matters, right? And I mean, there are statistics that show that companies that actually, you know, think of ESG seriously are like more robust to volatilities in the stock market, for example. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's like sort of what I think about it, but I think Keith and Swijin can probably provide their own perspective too. So, yeah.
Sure. Maybe Swijin, you would like to add on?
Yeah, so I think Nuri's given a very good overview and, you know, from an analogy point of view, and, you know, made it very easy for people to understand what ESG encompasses. Unfortunately, in the world that we live today, the E is very much more emphasized than the S and the G parts of it. So I think this discussion needs to take the ESG discussion more holistically. That's number one. Number two, you know, I think Nuri also brought up a very good point. The fact that, you know, companies do tend to stay in business for a longer time if they care about the environment and the communities and their multiple stakeholders. I think more and more we're beginning to go back to the reason why companies were started in the first place. I think if we all go back to the beginning of the corporation, we all understood that it was meant as a place where people could meaningfully spend their time and get some returns out of it. Unfortunately, as capitalism, I hate to say that capitalism is a bad word, but you know, capitalism taken to its extreme has produced the focus only on the shareholder and only on shareholder returns, which has led us then to the states that we are in right now. And of course, you know, we go back to the whole philosophy of sustainability. You can't talk about sustainability without talking about the tragedy of the commons. Now, I'm sure everybody understands what the tragedy of the commons means, which is basically exploiting common resources, which basically belong to everyone, but only the powerful are able to exploit it for their own gain. And you know, we've seen so many examples of environmental devastation. I think the most classic example of that is the Aral Sea in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan in Central Asia, where, you know, over farming and over irrigation, you know, whilst exploiting the water resources, has basically led to nobody winning and everybody losing. So, you know, and the same is of corporations, and the same is of the way that we've been running corporations for, I guess, not since probably the start of the Industrial Revolution. So, you know, I think it's time for us to recalibrate and re-understand what companies and corporations are here to do, not just for the environment, but also for all of the stakeholders involved, as opposed to only the shareholders.
Sure, thanks, Eugene. Last but not least, can we have Keith to chip in a little bit? I'm just going to ask a little bit deeper because, as Sujin correctly pointed out, ESG, you know, there's the S and G component, which you know, but I mean, a lot of people actually ask that question, including myself. Like, why do we not just call it E, but we also have this kind of governance? So how does the governance comes in? I think Sujin touched a bit about that. Like, you know, it's about working with the environment, and that's where the S comes in, social. But you know, if you could elaborate a little bit on that as well, I guess it would be or in any way that you want to explain ESG.
Yeah, from my angle, because I'm also accounting trained, so you know, from long ago there's a talk about, you know, the balance sheet, like what Nuri mentioned. It's not very complete. It's just a one angle of how to view companies, right? So there are other angles. So even when I was studying, there was no such things as risk disclosure. So that happens over the last 20 years. The balance sheet, they start to put in risk, market risk and those things which are important. So now they're looking at putting in things like, ESG elements inside the disclosure. So of course, they haven't do it as an accounting rule yet, because once you mandate it by law, everyone has to put in. But a lot of listed exchanges like SGX, for example, right, they have already mandated that you need to put in this sustainability report in the listed company. So they call ESG sustainability because I think they are talking about long term, whether, whatever your actions, is it sustainable for the environment, for the social, and also for the governance. So broadly speaking, this term is meant for, sustainable, as a species on Earth, whether what we do is sustainable. Yeah, because like I think the two speaker mentioned, a lot of things like pollution or this, you are actually having a lot of cost to the earth or to the population or to other people's social pollution of rivers, sea, just dumping all your waste into the sea. All these things you don't bear the cost, but everyone bears the cost, like eating toxic fish with plastics in the stomach and all these things, or the birds, eating all these plastics. So all these things, nobody is accounting for the cost, and we are all just buying cheap goods, happily, consuming. So it's not easy. So basically, we are trying to use it from, like listed company or even accounting standards. We're trying to first measure what's the, cost of using electricity, waste, how much waste you generate. And also, I think SGX has a very, core metrics. They say they measure all this in 17 or 27. I forgot. Yeah. So listed company has to start complying. But I guess in future, even non-listed company, they have to start reporting as per, they have to report their risk, right? To start reporting ESG in their balance sheet and financial report. So I think that's the trend going forward.
Right. So I understand that these are efforts to make business more sustainable. I'm wondering, how did this ESG term or trend start, and what's the history behind it? Maybe Nuri, you can give me some insight on that.
Yeah, Dion, can I just want to add on to that one? Because personally, for me, I only know about ESG. I mean, my understanding is there was a few years back where the leaders, met at Davos and they talked about ESG. That's where ESG actually got kind of popular between the financial industry. But actually, I'm kind of curious, was there ESG before that, or was it just something that only started to pick up after Davos mentioned that? Because I certainly only hear a lot of it talking about ESG only over the last 2 years.
So I mean, ESG is like a very broad term, right? Because environment on its own is a massive beast, right? And then the social and the governance aspects, I mean, to me also it's to do with fairness and equity. So I think it's a bunch of things that have come together, but maybe I could comment a bit more on the E. So, I mean, you guys know about the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, right? So I would say that the conversations really picked up after 2015 or was it 2015 or 2018? But after the Paris Agreement, they published a report, right? The 1.5 degree report. And that's when companies started to get very sort of anxious about well, not just companies, I mean, governments, individuals, everybody sort of started to pick up on this issue of climate more seriously. But I would say that, I mean, a lot of it has been all talk and less on execution. So, I mean, I'll let the rest comment on the historical aspects of, the whole term. But I mean, at least from the climate part, I think that was a defining report.
Right. Okay. Maybe Keith, would you have anything to add on to that?
Origin side, no, nothing to add on. But I think from my exposure is more like when we do listed company reporting and disclosure, so the SGX requirements came in. So I also got to know the details over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But I think it started much earlier, from the 1990s when they start talking about these carbon credits and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that they started talking about it a lot earlier. It's just that it was implemented in the recent 5 or 6 years.
Not just. I mean, the implementation is by phase, right? So it's okay. So first they have to start up, the marketplace. I mean, everyone wants to comply, but how to do it and so on. So they need to work out, what are the parameters, and if there's no carbon credit market, there's nowhere to buy all these things, right? Somebody to do it. So they have to start something. Once you have that idea, you have to get a few years for everything to work out.
I see.
Before
Okay.
people can start buying such carbon credits.
Okay. Sujin, would you have any insight about the history of ESG or anything that's relevant to this?
I would say that everybody here has made a very valid point, because I remember when I was living in Europe in the early 2000s, already the European governments were starting to trade carbon credits. So this is really not a new thing. I think over here in Asia, we've been a little bit slow on the uptake. You can attribute that to developmental causes as well. But this has definitely been hanging around the ethers for quite a while. So it's not. But Nuri is right. The watershed moment really was the Paris Accord, where everybody agreed to the 1.5 degree limit to the rise in global temperatures. But this has, I don't know. I think Keith and Shin, we're kind of the same generation. Remember when we were young, they were always talking about styrofoam boxes and CFCs and things like that. And and then we were taught that, this is detrimental for the ozone layer, and this will actually affect our way of life, and we'll all get skin cancer because the ozone layer is being depleted, right? So yeah, it's actually been hanging around for quite a while, but being put into a formalized reporting structure and making companies having companies be compliant to these regulations, that's been, I think, only in the past 7 or 8 years where it's really just taken off. So it's been around, but it's not been a requirement. That's all I can say.
All right, thanks, Eugene. I just want to comment the part about when we Eugene correctly pointed out we are about the same age. I reckon so. But I think when we were young, I think when we talk about CFCs and we talk about like replanting, at least personally for me, it never felt like global threat. Fine. Yeah, it's we're cutting down the trees, but maybe part of our lives will be affected. Maybe the flora and fauna, the diversity of the species is going to be affected. But like over the last few years, the narrative has dramatically changed. I felt like it's almost like a catastrophic, global level kind of a problem. And I do agree is that because once the climate change, we're at the tipping point, right, where it's going to affect every aspect of our lives. So that's what I felt about the ESG part from a personal point of view. I just want to bring the conversation to something that I think all the speakers have talked about, which is carbon credits. We're going to talk a bit more about how we're going to bring this ESG to blockchain, but because since every speaker talked about carbon credits, I just want to know more about that. Again, I don't know enough about carbon credits, but I felt like some people would say that carbon credit is kind of cheating because you don't really do environmental things. You basically just buy, and you can pollute as much as you want as long as you put in money, which buys a place of a forest in the Amazon forest very far away, and that should count as you doing an environmental job as well. So I just want to hear what you guys think about this thing. I mean, like, feel free, anyone can just chip in and just talk about it. Anyone wants to comment? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's other than carbon credit, I think there's the carbon removal credit, but it costs like 10 times or more expensive than the carbon credit, which means that this carbon, instead of the trees, but they are captured and removed from the atmosphere. So of course it comes with a cost, but I guess it's like a step process. You cannot jump everyone because there's a cost, right? Let's say 1 ton, instead of $6, you're paying $200, okay, for removing. So which company can put in that cost and whether customers can accept this cost? For example, I think in Singapore, they're replacing the styrofoam box with something that's environmental friendly and it costs 80 cents. Are you willing to pay for that, right? So,
but can I agree with that. Can we sort of like define what carbon credits is see if my understanding is correct. So carbon credits is basically you purchasing some sort of a credit, and that credit is actually being used for efforts to reduce carbon footprint, right? So it's almost like you as a company putting money investing in carbon reducing efforts that may not necessarily be taken by your own company, but can be taken by other people. It's like a global investment kind of thing.
So if you have mangrove swamp or some forest that you want to cut down for housing, but if you want to save, you can say instead of cutting down the forest, because the forest, the trees, right, they absorb the CO2. You can apply for these credits, which means that how much carbon I absorb every year. So that kind of gives you a ton of carbon credits based on the amount of forest you have. So basically, the companies that doesn't have forests, for example, they operate in Singapore or other places, they can buy credits from these companies that kind of generate the credits.
Okay, so I mean, kind of going back to a question that Shin asked earlier, I still am very curious, like about maybe Nuri or Swijin's perspective on this. Do you think that it just depends on how well off you are enough to buy these carbon credits, so like you can kind of pollute the environment more, for lack of a better term? It seems to me like the more money you have, the more ability you have to make the environment kind of like worse. What maybe Nuri or Sujin, if I have the wrong idea, you can correct me on that, but at the moment this is kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, let's take a couple of steps back. Okay, the whole idea and the whole concept surrounding carbon credits is basically the sinner pays, right? So for example, Dion, you've asked like a really good question. Does that mean if you're richer, you can sin more? It's like a cigarette tax, right? It's like, we're smoking and then we're giving off secondhand smoke, so we pay that tax, right? So it's almost exactly the same sort of philosophy behind it. And so therefore, you see that it is big oil who is purchasing most of the carbon credits, or carbon offsets is the technically correct term that we should be using, in order to offset the pollution that they have caused to the environment, right? Now, then you're saying, well, does that even help? Well, it does, because what it does is that it encourages producers of carbon offsets, for example, owners of mangrove swamps, owners of pristine virgin forests, not to engage in deforestation. So it does help. Let's put that into perspective in the macro point of view. Why would anybody be interested in that? Because, well, you can't, because it is a transformation journey, as Keith correctly pointed out, right? You can't expect big oil to just come off of their business. I mean, then, the S and the G component of their entire value proposition goes to pot, because then they've not been socially responsible. They're putting thousands of people out of work. In terms of their governance, their shareholders and all the markets would be affected. So yes, we are doing quite a lot of duct taping with carbon credits, but it is a necessary evil. And I would not say that I wouldn't even call it evil. It's just necessary that people start taking the necessary steps in the right direction, in order that this planet, or at least the human race, can continue for another couple thousand generations, hopefully.
That's
Nuri,
a good
would
point.
you have?
I think
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Shin, you can go ahead first.
No worries. I was about to ask Nuri as well. I just wanted to say that I actually like statement that whether we can first it puts a time limit on on Earth, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not. I mean, like, although scientifically speaking, from an astrophysics point of view, yeah, Earth's going to be here for billions of years, but really, there's actually a finite amount of resources, which basically means that with ever expanding population, there's a finite amount of time we can be here on Earth, and we have to renew this list every time through science, through environmental protection, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the first thing that I really like. And the second thing I like about this is that, I thought about all these environmental issues a lot myself, and I felt like, to be able to really see past all these things and, look at environmental in its rawest form, it's actually about being unselfish. Because if I can be very selfish, I could essentially say that within my lifespan, whatever climate change is going to happen, it's probably going to affect me towards the end of my life. I could essentially not do anything, right? But it's about our next generation. It's about future. It's about being unselfish, and I think that resonates with me quite well. Anyway, yeah, I was about to ask Nuri your comment on this one as well.
Well, so just a side detour, but I mean, if you do believe in reincarnation and you're a Buddhist, then you're going to be here to sort of witness the effects of it. So, so yeah, I think it all really depends on perspective. But one thing I just want to again, so use a simple example, and I really like the cigarette analogy that Sui-Jin briefly touched upon. So if you think about every industry as a cigarette, right? And then the planet is the lungs, right? So we know that smoking kills, it damages your lungs. So there's a couple of ways that you could reduce that damage. Either you just throw the cigarette and completely stop smoking, and that is the equivalent of completely stopping carbon emissions, right? So an industry could 100% switch to renewables or some other source, right? Or the other option is, well, I mean, it's very difficult to stop smoking. I have, so many things to do, so many commitments to keep. So why don't I just put a filter that absorbs all of the smoke? And if I can't afford to have a filter near me, I'm going to go and buy a filter that's hundreds of kilometers away and hope that absorbs someone else's smoke. So the filter is kind of like the carbon offset or the carbon credit. So there's a direct way to reduce emissions, which is, to just completely stop them. But if we do that, cold turkey, then, you don't have any petrol, you don't have any kind of energy to power your homes, and the economy comes to a standstill, right? And in other industries, maybe it's easier to decarbonize. For example, in the fashion industry, you could start to move to more renewable clothing sources or whatever, rather than keep synthesizing more polyester or other materials that are very harmful for the environment. But the solution is that, yeah, even though we know that the ideal state is that, we shouldn't be using any sort of fossil fuel to keep powering the economy, the reality is that it's not possible to do that, from the get-go, because we just have so many dependencies, and we have so many industries that depend on carbon at the moment. So that's where the carbon credit comes in. I mean, I think it's a stopgap solution. A carbon credit is just a token, right? And an offset is a mechanism that you can use to probably mitigate the effect of the emissions. So it could be like planting seaweed in some part of the ocean. Like, I know Microsoft has recently announced that they're going to be investing in carbon trapping technology. It could be, planting more trees in the Amazon, which we could go into later. It could be, investing in renewable energy projects, but those take time. And if you're like in the aviation industry or in the mining industry or something, then you're pretty much screwed, because I mean, the banks are not going to be financing you. But then it's a bit of a hypocrisy, right? Because this is the primary industry that's committing the emissions, but we're not really thinking about all of the industries that are dependent on these. So we also have to think about supply chains. There was a very good talk, I think, from some sustainable finance people, I think from Erasmus University, who mentioned that, we want to be sustainable, but nobody wants to pay for it. And I mean, to me, there's no straightforward answer, but it seems that if we want to really go to that 100% clean economy state, it may not be possible to do so without having another shock to our economy in the near term, but then eventually maybe things will balance out. So, I mean, these are my 2 cents on the topic, but yeah, it's very complicated.
I see. I think it's very interesting you brought up so many different industries, because every industry will definitely participate in a different way. And I wanted to bring this conversation to talk about the potential role of the blockchain industry in ESG. I'm really wondering, how can the blockchain help sustainability? I mean, like this is the whole topic that we were broadcasting for this particular conversation, right? Like, does the blockchain help or hinder ESG efforts? And maybe Keith, you can start off by talking about your experience with the blockchain, with carbon credits, and how the two are integrated and help each other.
Yeah, sure. So basically, from my point of view, the blockchain is a new tool, database tool. By itself, it doesn't really, help or hinder because it depends on how you use it. So some people will use it to help the industry, like using the database to make sure that the credits, the issuing of the credits are transparent and can verifiable on the blockchain and so on. So making it to reduce the cost. But of course, there will be some projects that will use it to, issue retired credits and then sell it as an investment. And we're doing discounting that doesn't help the ESG effort. So it all depends on the app that's built on blockchain. That's what I want to say. So by itself, it doesn't help or hinder. So some projects, of course, we know that in one of the issue, I mean, when we research on this, is that the carbon credits generate credits for the owner, but it's also costs a lot. For example, when you want to do audit verification, and sometimes let's say your credits you may have $30,000 dollars of credits, but your audit cost can be 90,000, more expensive. So this is one of the issue facing the industry as well. So one of the help that blockchain can come in is to make some of this audit more transparent and cheaper. So if that can be achieved through the blockchain, I think that will help in terms of reducing the overall cost of this carbon credit generation and carbon credit prices. So that's on the carbon credit side, but of course I can talk about a bit on the S and the G aspect as well, because one of the biggest application of blockchain is in the decentralized autonomous organization, right? In short, it's called DAO, whereby there's a new form of work coordination model. No longer have a company structure, and there's no board, no management, no employees, right? The terminology that they use is all different, right? There's contributors and founders and so on. And then there's no shareholders. It's all token holders, right? So because of this, a lot of our concepts of ESG is based on the company structure that we have been using for the last 400 years, right? The current company structure. So they will mandate that, for G, you need to have diversity, you need to have this and that, and then employees, you need to have, training, average diversity, and all these things. But I would say blockchain, because of this new blockchain structure, the DAO, it kind of turned upside down, or maybe it kind of challenged some of these ESG concepts. So how do you apply, like some of these ESG metrics or requirement when there's no board, there's no, you don't, some of the workers are anonymous, you don't know who they are. How do you apply gender diversity when you don't even know? I mean, this is like the new gig economy, right? Like YouTube creators, they are not employees of YouTube, right? How do you say, hey, I want to have diversity, I want to have this and that? It's quite hard because all these people, they just come in and do their work, contribute, get the money, go out, That's how it works in the blockchain industry. So we need to rethink, how does this ESG metrics apply to such a new, future work coordination model in the blockchain.
Yeah, it's very
my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting you brought in the S and G and then you questioned it because, blockchain is really all about like transparency, decentralization, and maybe, Sujin, like, do you have any opinion on how blockchain could help with the S and G, or maybe has blockchain opened up any opportunities for ESG in general?
Well, I think let's fundamentally go back to what blockchain is, and maybe Satoshi's paper to begin with. The entire premise of blockchain is decentralized, right? It is for the common good. And why did that happen? It all started because people understood that too many resources were being concentrated in too few hands. So that's exactly the same issue that we have with sustainability, with the environment, right? So, philosophically, these two are definitely good partners, blockchain and sustainability. Now, with respect to what Keith brought up about reporting standards, the reporting standards, even in sustainability, I think Nuri, as well as Keith, even Shin, you may be aware that there are so many reporting standards for sustainability, right? You have the GRI, obviously everybody follows that, the UN SDG, that's quite ubiquitous as well. But then you have ISSB, you have SASB, you have TCFD for the financial services industry, and everybody's coming up with their own standards. And this is where blockchain comes in, right? If we all agree that, it's about sustainability, it's about resourcing, it is about making the world a more a place that we can inhabit for a longer period of time, where everybody is equitably compensated. And then once these permissions and these standards are adhered to, then the blockchain is the perfect vehicle to carry it, right? This is absolutely not about following. So the standards, again, let's go back to the standards that, again, Keith refers to, the auditing standards, those are created for the purpose of the old economy, the one that was created during the Industrial Revolution, the one that we are slowly but surely stepping away from as we move into the digital age, right? So, these are, like I mentioned earlier, this is a transformation journey. It cannot take place immediately. It cannot happen overnight. But, as we move and as we understand that the economy is becoming more decentralized, we have to work for everybody's benefit. That's where blockchain comes in. That is the main premise of blockchain in the first place, right? And then it's also the premise of sustainability. We have to work for everybody's benefit. So, I would say that blockchain is the perfect vehicle to carry sustainability forward.
Sure. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think I echo both of the points from Keith and Swee-Jin. So I'm just going to focus a bit more narrowly on the E part, since the S and the G have been covered, and talk about a couple of properties of the blockchain that I think are really interesting in this space. So firstly, it's difficult to talk about blockchain without talking about data as well. And as you know, like in my sort of recent work, I started to look at this topic of how do we report on carbon emissions? How do companies report on their emissions? And even just looking at that side of it, there are many different standards and calculation methodologies that all kinds of fintechs and governments and different organizations are coming up with. And even though we have the greenhouse gas protocol, which is sort of a standard methodology that companies could use to calculate their emissions, it's still very much relying on self-reporting and subjectivity. And then these companies also don't want to disclose their method because it's like giving away their IP, right? So two properties of the blockchain that I think could help resolve some of these silos that are forming in the industry where everybody is having a central control could be one of them, the transparency of the ledgers. So for example, having a tool like Etherscan in the climate world, right? That would be really interesting, because then you could actually start to make companies have public disclosures, but then at the same time, there's no one central authority controlling it, so that anybody could go in and audit it and say, I mean, is this something that's actually, reasonable? And maybe there's also value in having public smart contracts where you can actually see this is the methodology that was followed. But of course, it's not just a technology problem, because when you look at this consensus, right, there needs to be consensus also at the human level, for people to want to be able to adopt the open approach. Because at the end of the day, everybody's playing a prisoner's dilemma game where they want to win and be the first to do something. But this is a topic where I think sharing is really the only way forward to progress. So I think the properties of transparency and decentralization in the blockchain are really interesting. But then there's also other applications that I think blockchain is already being quite, sort of prevalent in, like, for example, supply chain tracking. So, one way to get better data about carbon emission reporting is to really understand how supply chains are connected to each other. So, for example, Shin, if you were to go to the supermarket and buy yourself an Earl Grey box, a box of Earl Grey tea bags, you currently don't have any knowledge as to where all of the different parts of the tea bag were manufactured, right? So it's very difficult for you to make a decision. I mean, am I buying these, super environmentally unfriendly tea bags, or actually, have they been locally grown in Singapore or Malaysia, not in Singapore, but maybe in Malaysia, and can I actually, do something impactful, right, with my purchase? But you don't know that, right? Because we just haven't collected good enough measurements. And that's where I think the kind of traceability that you could have if you could go from source to destination is a great application, that the blockchain could sort of help provide because of the transparent properties, right? And then it also applies in the social and governance aspects. If you look at foreign aid, for example, there are companies like, I think, the Giving Block, who have already been looking at donating crypto tokens. So, I mean, one passion of mine would be to come up with a system where you could trace the entire flow of money through the economy. And maybe you could do it in such a way that, say, if I'm to go and donate to UNICEF after, there's been an earthquake that happened or whatever, then I actually know where my money's gone. And I know that, it's being used to purchase socks for this person. So really, the key word here is transparency. And I agree with Swee Jin's point at the start that, it's so much more than crypto, right? I mean, crypto is just a token. And I mean, there are many examples also that already exist, companies that are trying to look at, environmentally friendly tokens in the blockchain, like this company called Moss Earth. And also the MAS is precisely all about data and transparency. So they have this big project called Greenprint that started in 2020, and I think it's 2021, I think. So Sujin would know a lot more about it. But I mean, this is sort of like the general direction that I think the field should take. So I'm sorry that I've mentioned a lot of different examples in a short space of time, but I'm personally very excited, and I would love to become a blockchain geek. So please educate me.
So I'm just going to butt in for a while and address some of the issues that Nuri and Keith pointed out. So I'll talk about Keith's issue about the cost of auditing carbon credits as they stand right now. And you're absolutely right. The cost of auditing it is absolutely phenomenal, because I think everybody read the piece in The Guardian a couple of months ago about, Vera standards and even gold standards. These are the common standards that are used in carbon credit verification. However, there have been issues that have been found with these standards, and I won't elucidate on them. I think everybody can go to the Guardian article. Where blockchain comes in to play a role is that you are not one standard issuing body, right? And the thing is, the standards to the consumer are quite opaque. Whereas if, like what Nuri said, we can all agree this is a consensus-built standard, right? You put it on the blockchain, you put it on the public blockchain, and everybody has access to it. The solution then will be very, very transparent, and the auditing costs would plummet significantly. And everybody would be able to partake in this carbon offset economy, so to speak. Now, the other thing is, with regards to Project Greenprint, yes, correct. MAS did start it in 2021. It is still quite nascent. Actually, one of our members, Stacks, if you know about them, they are working on Project Greenprint on behalf of MAS. Now, again, for them, it is still a transformation journey. They currently have a registry of all of the verifying bodies and the standards and the certifications that you can get for carbon credits. But that is the beginning. Ultimately, it has to be a consensus-based effort that everybody has access to, is able to use in a transparent and cost-efficient manner, in order that we can make sustainability not just a game for the rich, as Dion correctly pointed out, but a game for everyone, so that ultimately everybody benefits. So I think we're all here because we are concerned that there is a limit to how far human life can progress. I mean, we don't want to go the way of the dinosaur, I'm sorry to say, but if we continue the way that we are, and if we continue to only use a certain set of standards because, hey, I got here first, so I created the standard, and therefore, my standard is the gold standard, then, unfortunately, this is not a game that everybody will play. And unfortunately, we will go into a dystopia where only those with resources are able to survive, and those without, I'm sorry, that's curtains for you.
Thanks, Eugene. I think that's really, really good point. I've learned a lot. And if I could take away something, right, it's like I felt like the ESG part, actually the governance part, is very important. It's not so much that we lack of methodology to be environmentally friendly or do something good for the environment, but just that a lot of things is about reporting standards, and even the definition of what is carbon offset, right? Like earlier, Nuri made a very good point. Every company would say that, yeah, I've offset this amount of carbon, but the way I calculate is very different from yours, and it might look better on me and not so good on you. And everyone, and if you can't even agree on this kind of basic definition, it's going to be a bit of a problem. And that's where blockchain comes in, right? Rightly so to point out that fundamentally blockchain is not just about crypto. It's a distributed ledger technology. It basically means that you need to have consensus of all the people partaking this effort. And then after that, you have to be transparent to publish these results to everyone. And so that really helps to democratize and, to a certain extent, even automates the whole process of getting a standard and agreeing to a same definition and work on that same definition. That's what I really take away from the very good features from our speakers earlier. I just have one more question. Like so far, a lot of the talk has been about institution, about like how it can benefit institutions. So I'm just curious, like, what's in it for me? If I ask a very selfish question, what's in it for the individual? What's in it for the layman and for the individual? So do I get anything out of it, or can I do anything on blockchain to actually help the ESG efforts? Anyone can take this question, basically.
Projects, they're trying to put the carbon credits on the blockchain so that investors can buy and create some volume. Because I think when we spoke to some of these traditional carbon credits provider, the thing is that currently probably 99% of the market is for people who really want to retire the credit, and this company who buy and retire it. There's not much people who buy and hold, hope that they will appreciate the price in future and resell it like an investment. So that's what we understand from the market, which means that currently if you put this unretired, because the thing is about carbon credits, they have a lifespan like 5 years and all these things. So you have to retire within this it could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending. So for this kind of characteristic, and then also it might not be so suitable, for investment because you cannot hold for long. And then the other thing is that a lot of carbon credits are created differently, right? So you have different quality credits and they have different characteristics. So for example, like some carbon credits come with some social element because you're helping the indigenous population, that kind of thing. So because of that, a lot of these credits, they are not that comparable, although you have a standards, right? So some blockchain, they are trying to make these standards, put in a portfolio of carbon credits and then resell this on the blockchain. So that's what we see. But I think so far, we haven't seen a very big uptick in terms of, people going to the blockchain to buy these credits. Because like I say, most individuals, they don't treat this carbon credit as an investment asset currently. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Keith. Nuri, do you have anything to add about how the individual can potentially use the blockchain to, participate in ESG efforts on a personal level?
Well, NFTs have become a craze, right? In the sort of crypto blockchain space. You guys are the experts, right? And I think, thinking beyond the art side, an NFT could be anything, right? And that's why I come back to mention this Brazilian company called Moss Earth. And I think what they've been trying to do is to trade NFTs that let people protect parts of the Amazon. I don't know how much in practice actually gets executed, which is one of the issues that sometimes, you may be investing in something and then you could purchase an NFT or some kind of token that certifies that this is an investment that you've made towards a charitable cause. But for example, the way to verify on site that this has actually happened is still fairly manual. So even though I think blockchain can definitely make an impact in that transparency side, and there could be many applications that could be decentralized and consumer facing, right? That could help people, also donate, for example, to some particular cause or get an investment return for what they're doing. There's also the challenge of making sure that whatever you've actually done has happened. And even technologies like, say, for example, if you take the example of planting trees, technologies like AI could actually verify that whatever you've invested in has actually taken place. So again, to me, the short answer is there's a lot that you could do as a consumer, but there also needs to be that end-to-end traceability traceability. And I don't think one technology alone can solve the problem. It's also a human governance problem, and then a combination of novel approaches to verify that what you're actually doing is indeed creating the impact that you want.
Right. Okay. What I'm hearing from you is that it's almost like a marrying of the individual and the organization to help spur these ESG efforts on. Sujin, do you have anything to add as a final note?
So I would say, I hear what Keith and Nuri are saying. So in terms of, protecting the Amazon, okay, let's take that as an analogy. We are, and with NFTs, right? Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fractionalize assets, and then we're trying to get everybody to take ownership of it. So everybody can participate in decarbonization, in net zero. And if this becomes sort of a societal movement to actually say, okay, we want to continue in perpetuity, as opposed to there's a hard stop on our existence on Earth, right? So so blockchain is the perfect vehicle. So for example, you're not a large corporate, you don't have a stake in trying to reduce your exposure and your and all the various fines that all the jurisdictions are putting on you for your pollution, but you want to have a stake in saying, I'm making a difference in this earth and I'm going to go forward and I'm going to make sure that the human race continues in perpetuity, then blockchain is the perfect vehicle for you to start getting into the fractionalized ownership of these assets that are available to contribute to improving the environment. So, I would say that there is an even larger discussion about how, carbon credits currently, yes, I agree with Keith, that, people are not looking at them currently as some form of liquid investment. However, with the upcoming legislation that will take place even in Asia and even on our very shores in Singapore, we will see the rise of carbon offsets / credits as a huge financial instrument that people should be partaking in, not just for the financial gain, but also to ensure the perpetuity of the species on this planet.
Thanks, Eugene. We are at the top of the hour now, so I think we had a really, really informative session today. I really enjoyed it. So just before I pass it to Dion to wrap up, I just have one last thing to comment, because I just suddenly realized that we left out the elephant in the room, because about a year ago, I think, or 6 months ago, I actually gave a talk at the Society of Actuarial, SOA, about blockchain. And actually a lot of them, because a lot of people from the SOA don't really know blockchain as well as we do. And one of the key questions that came out is about they still think blockchain is primarily proof of work, and they will say like, yeah, is actually contributing a lot of problems to the environment, which obviously then I pointed out to them that at that point the transition from Ethereum to proof of stake just happened a few weeks back. So I pointed to them that actually blockchain has made some development. And it's not all proof of work right now. We're moving towards proof of stake, which is going to save a lot of energy. I just want to make this statement because, like, for those people who joining our audience, who are not really that blockchain savvy, they might have this impression through the media that blockchain is inherently very polluting. But I think that's a fair point. But I also want to point out that it's a fair point because we don't want to save energy by spending more energy to save energy, which doesn't make sense. But I just want to point out that actually blockchain is also evolving technology, and we are improving a lot. And proof of stake is just one great example of where we actually reduce the carbon footprint by, I can't remember the number, it was more than 90%, right? And I think more of this development is going to come. So ESG and saving the environment is going to come from two directions, if you will, not just in a single direction. So I just want to end up with addressing this question, and just want to pass to Dion to see if she has anything to add, and we probably can wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Shin. Yeah, by the way, the percentage was 99.98% decline in energy use when switching from proof of work to proof of stake. So that's quite a fair bit, I would say. But anyway, unfortunately, we have to wrap things up here, but I really had a lot of fun listening and learning about this topic. Thank you firstly to all speakers for contributing to such an insightful conversation. I hope you had as much fun as we did. And I think Shin has something to say to the listeners as well. Oh, Shin.
Do I? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you want to thank the listeners who tuned in, right?
Yeah. I really thank the speakers. I can't thank the speakers enough. And I just want to thank the listeners as well for tuning in. Certainly hope that you guys have enjoyed this session as much as I have. Last but not least, don't forget to follow us and our speakers on Twitter, including MarginX, so that you know when our next Twitter will be. Our next Twitter space will probably continue revert back to Twitter space, but just stay in tune. I mean, we'll always keep ourselves updated on our Twitter account, so that you know where to follow us on our next talk.
Yeah. And in addition to that, MarginX is currently running its liquidity pool program. At 12 noon today, you will be able to deposit USDT directly from FX Core into our Maker liquidity pool. So be sure not to miss that. And yes, we will see you again next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.